again, everyone, for the beautiful day. And thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate you guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe to YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast platforms. It really helps the algorithm get out there and to maybe help someone who needs to listen to this specific episodes and many others. Also, the views and the opinions of the City of Los Angeles Fire Department are not those that reflect the GrabLives Podcast platform. Sorry about that. So for today's guest, I have Nate from MovMed. He's a returning guest, and I've worked with him personally and learned a lot from Nate and how he understands mastery of the body, the body's internal mechanisms, and how the body's neuromuscular, fascial, integrative, pressurized connection. He's got such a great outlook on how we see movement, how we see the ability to understand our position in this playing field of existence. And he doesn't just work with people with injuries. He helps people to understand the embodiment of the system. Nate's a fascinating person. He's one of the more advanced human beings I've come across around understanding bodily functioning techniques. So it's a great conversation that's been a great podcast I've been waiting to have with Nate and his following he has all over the world, really. So please enjoy this conversation. I love you guys. Take care.
It's time for Grab Lives.
All right, dude. I'm recording now. I got Nate on the podcast today from MovMed. He's the author of the book From Stress to Strong. And dude, that was I went through that book and it's very complex. I love how you're prioritizing the nervous system and trying to help people heal from a foundational standpoint. And I think we had you on before. I really didn't know much about your work before I had you on the podcast. I was just like, let's just have Nate on just because I'm in San Diego and let's just do it, and then we worked together and just all the things we were focusing on were estranged to me. It was like a foreign land. You know what I mean? And so right after that, I was like, okay, whatever Nate was showing me, it sent me back to the drawing board, like stop whatever I'm doing with my body and reposition myself. And so that's exactly what I did since then. And there's been a lot of progress with my movement, my approach to how I see my body. And it was amazing, dude. So I'd love to, have a more stimulated conversation today around that. And, for someone like yourself who I believe studies the body from a different standpoint from where a lot of people are viewing the system, because there's so much information out there, man. And I want to kind of cut through all that and get foundational with everything so people have a better building block with how we perceive this vessel.
Yeah, I'm into it. I appreciate you having me back on. It was a pleasure when we got to work in person. I do definitely prefer, especially when we're getting started, having some like hands-on exposure so it's not drowning you in foreign concepts the way that you might have experienced if we were to do it online. But end all be all, yeah, the challenge is always making it simpler, making it more easy to consume so that the abstract isn't so abstract for people who are excited to learn it.
Yeah, what do you mean by abstract? Go into that a little more, bro.
If you don't have language for it, or if it's not something that you have a sense of memory or expectation for, it's very possible you as in the anyone exposed to it for the first time might have a sharp reaction to it or a defensive reaction to it. And that's all to say, it's like if you start to breathe different and your body starts to stretch a little more, tighten a little bit more, it's going to perceive that it's either a little bit less stable, a little bit more stable. And if someone's not in a position to change how stable they are emotionally, physically, or otherwise, it's always going to be threatening.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, there's so much information, like I was saying before. And so what the stuff you I kind of approach with threatens most of what we believe as how the body functions. So
Yeah.
I think when you threaten someone else's foundation, what they thought was important, and you give them completely 360 turnaround on how they approach the system, particularly focusing on breath, diaphragmatic breathing, things like that. You're like, hey, this is less sexy than doing like bicep curls. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's also less. I think there is a quality of people, just the same as the way they would smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol. They pursue these kinds of lifestyles because of the kick they get from it, not because of the gratification that they'll get intrinsically, not the dopamine that they'll earn that systemizes, oh, I can wake up early and not feel stressed about it. I can go do something hard and not feel stressed about it. For the most part, people are stuck in some kind of ideation of the way they are is correct, or the way they are is the way they should be, and changes that exist that they don't necessarily have a name or words for are oftentimes unwelcome, like someone else's perspective trying to be overlaid on them. And I think the biggest issue is most people aren't very self-aware of how reactive and how uncomfortable they are. We're all wearing masks, we're all putting on some kind of show, and at the end of the day, I mean, if we could lie to ourselves, we would, I think.
Oh, dude, I'm 100% in the game of trying not to lie to myself, but realizing how much I do lie to myself,
Yeah.
and it's devastating to see how much we lie to ourselves. And if anyone says you don't lie to yourself, you're full of shit because you really do. And we get up every morning and put these costumes on, and then we drive into the circus, and that's the game, So I think coming back into the system, like the body where it feels intrinsically safe, you become less of that. That becomes less of a game for you. You start to actually be less entangled with lies. And I think that really starts with the body, and that's one of the foundational set points for people. And I think overall, like culturally, man, I was just having a conversation with someone at work. Like, we all grew up around watching, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone and idolizing these men, like wanting that body type.
Yeah.
And you look at those guys now, right? They've got like so many different shoulder reconstructive surgeries. They look awful, dude. They look old as shit. And you
But
compare that to like this guy the same age who's been doing yoga for 30 years. And you're
yeah.
like, they look like a completely different person or a
Yeah.
comparison to this other person.
I mean, everything is circumstantial. I mean, there's no way to say that everyone's born equal. I think a real good distinction is that there are people who are spectacular freak athletes that 99.9% of people just can't compare to. Similarly, there are people who are freakishly smart, and it's like a totally different perspective or species when you're communicating from that person's like peak awareness to a standard person. And at the end of the day, most people aren't wanting to experience increased load. Like if someone has woken up and gone to bed basically in the same mood for the last 2 decades, making them aware that their reaction type or their uh, presence to their own heart rate increase or intensity around them is lackluster, they're they're not going to be inclined to be like, all right, let's increase the pace, let's get intense, and let's match the way I've not been matching it. More often than not, people will just condition themselves to find the lifestyle that makes the most sense for their comfort. And you're a distinguishing like element there in that you work in a like a first responder life threatening environment around other people who are similarly life threatened. And the reality of it is, you have a completely distinct quality of being able to match your own physical arousal. When your body goes into a state of fight or flight, your brain's like, let's see how we can handle this. It's not like, oh no, oh no, oh no. Even if it is a panicking moment, you're like, we have only one option. Let's get through this. And majority of people are either going to shrink or they're going to hide from it. And that's the nature of it. You don't necessarily need to fight or flight. You just need to match the circumstance, be present to it. And most people can't. When their heart rate goes in overdrive, their brain doesn't like smooth out and assess, okay, we're feeling like this, we're feeling like this, we're feeling like this. For the most part, when someone goes into overdrive, the emotions, the thoughts, all the panic that comes with that, and you, whether it be from your own learning or your own experience, and you're like, dude, I have to make a choice here. I don't want to be like this, or whatever. You've learned to like match that threshold and then choose to go into it for a living. And that's something that 9 out of 10 people have either no memory of or no want for.
Yeah, it's different for everyone. Like I've worked with men in their 50s who, they were extremely active till they hit 48, and then everything just completely exploded on them. And then I've seen, younger guys on the job where they started off with small injuries, and that load they increased of containing like a fight or flight, nervous system reaction to, long shifts, busy assignments. Those little small injuries were leaks in the system that started to kind of have a snowball effect on the entirety of their body for like 5 years. And then now they're completely broken, and then they never fixed the core issue.
Well, what you just mentioned is it's hard for everyone. It's not distinctively like, it's not an either or where you're like, I'm designed for stress or I'm a puppy designed for cuddles. We do choose, or circumstantially, we end up in our own environment of, okay, I can be more intense or I can be more passive. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's you're either settling for a lifestyle that you seek, or you're settling for the lifestyle you think you deserve, or that's familiar. And the only thing that really differentiates the people who make the decision or don't is they choose. They say that suffering or the weakness or whatever strength factor I have that I want more of, I need to earn. And in order to do that, I need to face the moments where I'm like, I want to give up. I'm terrified. I'm going to cry. I'm panicking. I have nothing. And I mean, a first responder environment is you're not only facing that for yourself, but you're helping people who are facing that in their own right. So I guess the real notion is that, are we at a position where we're trying to train dogs in cages, or are we trying to train other humans to be themselves? Because if our goal is by the end of this to train domesticated dogs, then by all means teach them to do whatever it is that they want to do. But if you have the intention to help people long term, to make them capable like yourself to look at something and be like, dude, we're going to have to walk into that. We can't avoid it. Otherwise, we're going to have regrets, or there's going to be consequences. We have to handle this. In order to teach people that, they need to want to put themselves through hardship. And that's not something that's like, you have to earn that. It's something you have to be given the opportunity to face and choose. And that's what movement is. I put them into panic mode. I put them into some circumstance where it's like, look, you're going to have a lot of input here, meaning your brain's going to be cycling through 10 times the amount of information it usually does. But there's going to be so much less going on in your environment that this is just going to make you feel like you're kind of having a small panic attack. And our goal here is to recognize, look, you're going to face it. You can't run away. There's no environment around you that's going to save you from the thing that's happening to you right now. It's either you stop doing the exercise or you embrace it. And in those moments, I think people just find that for the first time in their life, they have just like a little leeway to not panic and run away.
No, I totally agree. I mean, yeah, it's the resiliency to the stressors that our bodies, you kind of build the body to allow it to feel like it can handle that. And that's the thing too, is like going to becoming a firefighter, like you have to go through an academy. And those academies is where we start weeding out people who are not mentally equipped to handle thresholds.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. You'll see so many different types of humans coming into a fire academy. You got You got women who are like CrossFit champions. You got the D1 athletes, even NFL players. You got all these different array. I got extreme endurance athletes, and I was an endurance athlete, and that's how I wanted to push myself. And it's crazy though, once you put on these turnouts, like the heat is what gets people. And that pressure threshold is where people start breaking,
Yeah.
because that's where panic starts to happen.
Yeah.
And when you put on your respirator mask, even that causes some claustrophobia, and you'll see people really freak out with that. And so that's where you start to recognize, people who can have that stressor response and be okay.
Yeah.
And so once you're finished with that academy, then you go into the real world of application, going into actual fires and things like that. And it's really interesting to see who's got that grit, and that's really where it's at. And it's really interesting to watch every single different individual. It's crazy because like the toughest dudes I've seen are like really heavy set Mexican guys and tall, skinny white guys.
That's very funny. I was just thinking I had a don't tell me. Oh man. I had a thought. It went right out the door. It's not here
No, okay,
anymore.
bro. Yeah, so that the stressors are great, and I've seen so many different opinions on the internet. It's so annoying, but I think the cold plunging and the sauna has been a big one for a lot of people, because these are small stressors to
Yeah.
allow the body to go through that moment of, oh my god, this is the end, and you work your way through it. And
Totally.
and two of those two extremes, and then people are saying, oh, the cold plunge is, it's a stressor. Yeah, it's a stressor, but it has a rebound effect where it goes rebounding into vagal tone, and rebounds into deflating inflammation, which I found interesting. And then so those are the two things that I've seen personally, where there's just so much data around it. But everyone has to be equipped to listening to their own system, like what their own system needs. And
Totally.
I think you do a good job at letting people decide for themselves their own input on what's important for, like, what you're throwing at them. What are the stressors, and you just watch them react.
I think one of the distinct issues with most people is that we don't know how intense something is for someone. So regardless of what they're making faces about or whatever, we can't really experience their internal state. And it's oftentimes, I think, the experience, especially through like internet training, where you have a bunch of people who are in some fashion like overly neurotic hypochondriacs. They've been looking at the internet, telling them what they are and who they are, versus having perspective to like counterbalance that. And some people have issues with things that aren't real, or things that aren't like exchanged. So, not to say that it's not happening for them, but it's not something that's happening that someone else could observe. And because of that, and their lack of ability to communicate like clearly, or to a depth of, hey, I'm going through this. This is what's bothering me. These are the things. When they don't have skills like that, it's like a ooh ooh, and then the expression of like yuck is more of a guttural thing than it is a thoughtful thing. And I think the biggest issue is we're a really dumb species this year. Like there's a bunch of people who just don't have what would be required of them to be a little bit more free thinking, or a little bit more like self supportive. And I think one of the main things that distinguishes that is that putting language to things that you don't have an emotional or memory value to. So emotions and memories form in the same place, your midbrain, and effectively, when you don't have stability in the connection between your brain and spinal cord, it impairs midbrain behaviors. So you're going to experience, like, not just here, but throughout your entire body, some degree of overwhelm in that framework. And if someone has defined their existence over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years with that consistent inflammation, that person has no idea what it means to look like their eye changes direction without that also determining their heart rate, or without that also determining a scale of thoughts and emotions that no one else is privy to. And so at the end of the day, the thing that is of value is engineering an environment for people to be like, there's nothing threatening here aside from your own reactions to yourself. So we're going to go through a couple of your own reactions to yourself. It's going to take 30 minutes. It might take 3 weeks. It might take 3 months. At the end of the day, you're going to have enough experience and exposure to yourself that when you go into your next moment, or you go into your next interaction of this type, you'll have a predictive processing. Like, you'll have the ability to assess what's going on and then potentially apply your memory to this future behavior. When that doesn't happen, there's just like, my hair's on fire, everything's burning. I was going to ask you, and I remembered it. What was the first injury you remember having experienced that was significant? Like, what
My
was your
first,
first big injury?
no, I was running marathons. And so I was running 10 miles a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was running on the riverbed, and then I felt this snap at the bottom of my foot, like the arch of my foot. And so I had to have my ex-girlfriend at the time pick me up because I was probably 8 miles out in the riverbed. So that was
Yeah,
my first injury.
that was your first.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me about this one when we met, but that
Yeah.
was like nothing from childhood, nothing from teenage years.
So I've had head injuries in the
Yeah,
past, like skateboarding, playing soccer, playing
sure.
football, but I would bounce back from those,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
relatively speaking.
when I was 18, 17, right. And that was the thing, dude, is so I would say I'll take that back. My first actual huge head trauma was when I was playing soccer my senior year CIF game. I went up for a header, clashed skulls with this kid, went down on the floor, had a seizure, and was
Ugh,
knocked out.
okay,
And then I
that's
had amnesia for 2 days. So that was
yeah,
a pretty significant injury.
yeah. Well, I mean, from that point forward, you can assume that there's some degree of inflammation that exists in your brain, in your skeleton. So, like, down from your head through your spine, that doesn't just like, oh, let's disappear because we have no issues anymore. If you hit someone with your own head, I mean, there's no telling. That was one of my first injuries too. Knocked myself unconscious riding my bike.
Yeah, and in the area where I hit my head too, it was just above the left parietal lobe, so just above the eardrum. And so that affects balance, like the balance area, and even speaking. I
Hmm.
remember I had like some type of speaking issue after that. Like I would talk and I would like do something like
Yeah.
that.
So anything that factors into a brain trauma, it's not that you did necessarily damage to the brain. It could just be the pathway. So
Mm.
when I was young, I would not lisp. My brother did. I stuttered sometimes, or I had issue. Yeah, I would stutter sometimes. There was a number of like light sensitivity, tinnitus, a variety of things. It was just like my brain was not taking in information comfortably. It was taking in too much information. But what I think that okay, so we grew up in enclosed environments. I can close that door and be deaf to majority of the sound outside. I could put a blanket on and be warm to majority of the cold. Like I can condition myself due to privilege or circumstance, a degree of safety immediate to my nervous system. I could self-soothe my nervous system very rapidly currently. As a baby or a child, if you grow up with enough of that stress factor where you don't really have the opportunity to self-soothe in immediacy, you're either going to have to figure out tools for, if this happens again, what do I do? Or come to terms with the fact that this happened, I will handle it differently in the future. And in some fashion, that turns into a productive or proactive self-regulation. I think majority of us, because we don't have the experience of learning to depreciate increased heart rate or panic or threat, we don't know what it's like to talk ourselves off a ledge. And if you're doing something that requires you not be anywhere near the ledge because you're already like dealing with stuff that's dangerous or worrisome or whatever, then you need to have that like down pat. Otherwise, being on the ledge while there's fire burning around you is tremendously dangerous. Or being on the ledge while you're trying to take care of someone else who's on their last leg, that's dangerous. And I think fundamentally what we need to come to terms with is most people don't have any perspective of what it means to navigate their panic. They may know how to navigate their emotions, but naturally just like the angst, the increased rate of perception. And that's what we need to do. We need to go, not necessarily force ourselves to take an ice bath or a cold bath. I mean, that's something that a nervous system that can handle it, by all means, do it. But effort comes before uh, life survival or like regulatory behaviors, meaning if your body can't manage its own equilibrium, there's no way it can manage its own temperature. And so if there's going to be a consistent drain on you not knowing how to like, all right, calm down, calm down, calm down. When you go into those environments, you're going to be draining more energy, more effort than you should be. And it's going to be a bad experience. Not for you necessarily, not for me necessarily, but for someone who, when they go into some place like that, thinks they're dying. And that's what usually happens. I went to an ice bath like 2 years ago. It's just the same notion of people like, all right, you're going to do tumo breathing. You're going to like work yourself up. And this guy was literally hyperventilating while they were giving him more and more cues. I mean, he was going into shock. And it wasn't because it was too cold. It wasn't 50 degrees or whatever. It was because he had no like wherewithal for how to handle it. And he probably like just freaked out, tensioned himself into a stress response near panic attack.
Yeah. Yeah. So this kind of leads into, I'd love to hear your perspective on just the nervous system. Because I think so many people are not realizing how important the nervous system is. And just even describing what the nervous system entails. And I know you focus a lot on getting the body out of stress. That's how you heal. And
Yeah.
so nervous system is so important it's the main priority with stress.
Well, I think we can probably assess that real quick. I was just thinking about this the other day. For anyone listening, close your eyes, move your head back and forth. How do you know you're moving your head back and forth? For you, for example, how do you know you're moving your head back and forth?
Well, it's not autonomic. I have to forcefully move my head.
Yeah,
So
but if your eyes are closed, how do you know it's happening?
I can feel my neck move.
You
Number
can feel
one. Yeah.
feeling, although it is arbitrated to be an emotional experience, feeling before it has any secondary limbic value, it is fundamentally your ability to perceive motion or a lack thereof. Sensation drives function. So even though your eyes are perceiving stuff, it's driven by them feeling it. Maybe we're not super sensitive to be able to be like, oh, this feels like this. But that being said, it all comes from sensory inputs. Our nervous system fundamentally drives off of sensation. What it can feel, it can produce results from. What it can't feel, it's going to manufacture results from. So, for example, if something is, you have trouble balancing, you have trouble moving quickly, or you have trouble reflexing quickly, you're probably going to wear a little bit extra tension so that your body feels the parts of it that it doesn't necessarily have access to when those reflexes are needed. Meaning that person's going to hold down the gas pedal just a little bit longer, a little harder, or keep their foot just a little closer to it because they need to feel comfortable that it's there. That's how most people go about their existence. Now, sensation, if you just accept it for what it is literally just a qualifier of your relationship to an area. We're really, really dense in sensation in our homunculus, so like our hands, our face, our genitals, our feet. And then there are places that are more unconscious, like our whole dorsal body, our whole backside is more
Mm,
sensory driven as opposed to motor driven, meaning the sensation we perceive there is not as acute as our belly, where we can think about flexing a six pack and making that happen. Our back is a lot less easy to like piece together just because it is predominantly sensory. So the limitation with sensation and motor function is that majority of us walking around are walking around with tension, which is not a sensation, it is a motor output. So if you're walking around like pressing the continuous button on your body, that's you doing something. And if your body is intending to reflect or like react to something, it has to first handle this. And if it can't bypass this or get over this, then that reflex is going to be weird or wrong. Majority of people are not doing the thing they want to do wrong. It's they're doing something else. And they
mm,
just don't know how to get through that something else that has nothing to do with the behavior. And so my job is to be like, hey, you see that thing, the doorbell you keep ringing that has, it's like, the ringing you have in your ears? It's because you keep pressing your own buttons. We need to
mm,
get clear that that button does not have anything to do with this exercise. Although it is comforting for you to panic in a familiar way, we're going to give you a new way to panic. I'm going to show you how it is for your heart rate to increase, your thoughts to increase, your temperature to increase. And then I'm going to show you how to calm down without taking yourself out of that experience. So you don't have to worry about this stuff anymore. You should have to worry about, okay, these are my tools. These are my self-soothing tools. I need to build them until they become reflexive, till they become something that regulate my system instead of something that I have to constantly press the button. That's the nervous system. My job is to take the button away from you and make it so that you don't have to regularly condition yourself the way you expect you will get results. Rather, like an etch a sketch, wipe the slate clean, let you start from scratch and just experience your own inside as it is. There's no wrong. Maybe you make an ugly picture, but we're going to get through that just as easily. And next time it'll be a little prettier. End of the day, most people are just in their own way, neurologically, in their brain, physically, but it's all the same.
yeah, and I think so what you have just introduced is like there's all these information pathways, right? From this voltage system of what we call the nervous system, right? And like this nervous system is the transmitter of all that information, but we just don't perceive where that information is going and what information portals are extending out of, like either the front of the body or the back of the body. And that's important to understand when we're talking about things like proprioception, or we're talking about things like functional movement, or even just perceiving your surroundings and walking, like being bipedal and walking forward or walking backwards. So like I think we just extracted ourselves from seeing the body as an intelligent system for a very long time, where we saw it more as like this machine. And I love how you take into the neurological standpoint of how neurology functions also in repeat mode if you allow it to, because it will. And so if you don't allow it to be in repeat mode anymore and you're extending other signals, now you're allowing the body to perceive much more to where it's functioning neurologically around the entire environment as opposed to just clicking that button constantly. So I think it's a fascinating concept because many people don't go to neurology or stress, or they don't go to these functional uh, activities because they want to get a fat ass and they want to get six pack abs, right? All
Yeah.
this superficial bullshit, when that may be functional for a while in your 20s because you're compensating. But what happens when you start adding stressors in your life and you're constantly in a state during this rat race of life, right? And something happens and something trips, the breaker trips in that voltage system. That's where people start having injury, and they start working through these injuries, and they keep going to, let's say back pain, right? Everyone has had back pain because a lot of people sit in a chair for a very long time, and they stop breathing correctly with the diaphragm. And this is kind of like what happens. They go to physical therapy and they do all these core stabilizing exercises, but they're still not perceiving the stress factor. They're still not perceiving the functional neurological standpoints. And with the way you approach it is so fundamental that people that extracted themselves from it, where they have no set point anymore. And I think that's one of the main problems. And I've really did this for myself when I was working with you. I was like, okay, what do I got to do for myself? And I was doing the same thing. I was poking a button constantly in my neurological system. And so I think right after I was working with you, I just started working with a functional neurologist, and he was teaching me a lot. And he basically helped me understand what was happening in my body, so that concussion I told you about basically shut down the right side of my body. So all of my tension was, he basically treated me like a stroke patient. So all of that tension,
You had a
right.
seizure as a child. That's a big deal.
And so I asked him, like, how did this happen? I would always ask him questions, and he'd always have an answer for me. And he's like, it's just trauma, dude, like blunt trauma to the head. And, but he said my body would still compensate, but I wouldn't be like as severe as a stroke patient, but I would still have the symptoms, but my body would still compensate by creating casting mechanisms and a shoulder that would be rounded forward, and my posture would be all jacked up.
I think majority of kids have had injuries at some point, and I think majority of kids. It could be like a little kid falling. I mean, how unprotected our bodies are, it has nothing to do with how often you skateboard or rollerblade. You could just fall,
Mhm.
and I think majority of people have that, and it immediately makes us reactive. So you think about all the kids that have ADHD or ADD or some kind of spectrum disorder. I I guarantee to you, vast majority of people who are diagnosed have neurological deficits that just dysregulate. And if you were to resolve a lot of those things in very simple ways, like deep pressure therapy, just like tempering, you'd find that those people are much less symptomatic than you might think.
Mhm.
There's so much that goes into a descriptor of defining someone, but at the same time, there are very few things that allow people to retroactively undo the damages. I mean, like, you go to therapy, you talk about it, but you make it concrete, you make it substantive. And
Mhm.
once it becomes substantive, then it becomes like a memory, a tangible that when you're talking to people, oh, don't forget to mention that part of yourself. Okay, I hear that there's some legitimacy if someone is bipolar, if someone has some degree of trauma because X, Y, and Z happened to them. There's no dismerit there. It's real. What is not real is defining yourself based off of that as opposed to who you were prior to or without that. Because everyone else gets the luxury of not having that baggage. And the reality of it is, if you want to have a normal life, you can either accept that you have the baggage and work through it, or go hang out with other people who have the exact same baggage and you'll feel normal. But there is no the spectrum, the whole notion of good autism versus bad autism or whatever. There's no such thing. It's all conditional on, okay, maybe the circumstance makes that person a little more reactive. Maybe they're how intelligent they are makes them a little more reactive. How physical they could be makes them more reactive. At the end of the day, the brain and nervous system is just like you say, an electrical outlet, and we are full of water. So sometimes it's uncomfortable to be electrocuted by your own brain, essentially.
Okay, so I did want to talk to you about this, and this is some of my own studies that I have done. So after talking to you and working with you, I had basically taken into account that whatever I was doing, I was doing isometric exercises, and some other pressure would be sent to my body, or my QL would be gripping, my multifidus would be gripping my low back,
Yeah.
and so yeah, so I keep pushing these buttons. So I was like, okay, stop, 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 whatever I'm doing. And so what I have come across is something called the deep frontal line. I'm sure, have you heard of that before? I'm going to put a picture up, and
Yeah, your tongue to your toe.
So the deep frontal line is essentially it's not coming up. Fuck. Um, so
SFL and DFL.
So the deep frontal line, and this goes into much of my other trainings that I've had working with yoga, working with qigong. So the deep frontal line is the mechanical mechanism of both of what in Qi they say called the Chong Mai. It's the central governing vessel, and in yoga they call it the Sushumna Nadi, the central channel. And so everything from this midline is the midline actually is one of the first mechanisms that starts creating itself in utero, and it's connected to the nervous system and the heart. So this central vessel is where everything extends off of this. And so the deep frontal line is basically this fascial system. It's a giant band that operates from the bottom of your feet that goes up to the inner thighs through the pelvic floor and goes up through the psoas, the diaphragm, and goes up all the way to the top of the skull through the neck. So this is all vagal tone. This system, and it's shitty that I don't have this picture. I thought I brought it up, but um, so this vessel, right? This it's not what people think it is because they think of fascial bands as like elastic, and they think of it as like an extension type cord. This system specifically operates off pressure. It operates like hydraulic pressure and fluid. So this all goes about atmospheric pressure, how our body perceives atmospheric pressure for us to be bipedal, walking around with pressure outside of us. And so this actually helps the body to create internal posture. So when I started working with the deep frontal line, I began to see my body moving less like a tractor and more like a panther, light on my feet. And I'm in the tiller bucket on a truck. And so anyone who's working as a firefighter, you're bouncing up in that bitch like a lot. And it's like a goddamn trampoline in that thing sometimes, depending on how old your truck is. So when I started doing this, I felt more buoyant in that bouncing mechanism. And
Awesome.
so when I started studying this, dude, I was like, hold on, like this is most of what Nate teaches is understanding this internal pressurized system and also understanding like when you put the breath belt on people, like all that's doing is helping you establish vagal tone with diaphragmatic breathing. And so I was like, holy shit. And does certain exercise. Most of your exercises, dude, mostly integrates the deep frontal line. And so I found it really fascinating how I connected the dots with a lot of this. And when you are focusing just on deep frontal line, this allows the system to now have a containment mechanism with pressure. So any leaks in your system, like let's say you have scar tissue somewhere from surgery, actually starts to propriocept and fix itself. So um, I was interested in if you can kind of relay more on pressure in the body, because that seems to be something not a lot of people talk about.
Sure. As far as terms go, the DFL and the SFL are both fascial lines that converge on the midline. The midline is kind of like a vague thing. DFL is a thing. The midline isn't really.
Mm.
And that's why there's so much miscommunication. I mean, like some people will definitively call the anatomy lines or the fascial lines the midline, wherein the midline is a like a amalgamation of all those things. So if you think in terms of like, I can rub my chest right here, and that can have a midline response. It can have a calming response to my brain because I'm interacting with this tissue that is not just innervated, but also like anatomically, like the force is connected to changes along the attachments to the brain. So the midline is effectively the spine and what it's attached to. So your spine is everything. When you talk in terms of the deep front line or the superficial front line, both those things are defining mechanical factors for moving the midline or stabilizing or generating control over it. I think there's just this underlying hacking ability you can do with the midline that you can't do with the DFL and the SFL because they're tissue as opposed to part of the brain. So like you can do a bunch of the weird kind of somatic stuff to the midline and get some great results. You're doing that to the DFL and the SFL. They work because it integrates back into the midline. As far as pressure is concerned, I mean, as a baby, the fundamental is stuff goes into the face, it comes out the butt. In order for us to keep stuff from coming back out the face, we have to be able to seal off what's down here. In order for us to seal off, we have to be able to maintain pressure in the head. Those things are just like a balloon. If I had a balloon, I could show you. But when you have volume in one area and you don't have, and you have, okay, so this is pressure, this is volume. Pressure is associated with tension. Volume is associated with space. This would be like if I'm flexing. This would be if I just taken a breath or if the tissue's saturated or stretched or whatever. Now, if these two places are adjacent, by creating pressure here, I'll increase the volume here. It is the exchange of pressure, like a tube of toothpaste, that makes things possible. So, for example, you have tension in your homunculus, like I said before, your hands, feet, face, groin. Then every transition that is pelvis into legs is going to be messed up. Thorax into arms is going to be messed up. Pressure returning from your hands and feet to your heart is going to be messed up. Not just because it's going against gravity, but if this is holding tension, why would blood leave that area? So the goal being is that when we have issue with tension, say I have issue with tension in my hand and I have like arthritis hand, what I would try to accomplish with someone is I'd try to accomplish reducing the volume in the wrist. So in the compression of that wrist, when that starts to become more full and more dense, then volume can return to the hand. So everything that is pressure related in the body is just an exchange of, best example would be chest and belly breathing. We isolate, should we do chest breathing? Should we do belly breathing? There's no such thing as either or. When the chest expands, gets big, pressure increases in the abdomen. Now, with respect to us being able to retain some of that value, some of that connection between chest and belly, on the exhale, our diaphragm is going to lift back up and it's going to make our chest small. If we can retain this quality of exchange, then what we're doing is effectively just moving the breath between the chest and belly, not holding it in one and then making sure the other one doesn't move. It's literally just you're eating pressure, it exits out your butt. Now, if you can stack it on the pelvic floor, boom. Now you take bigger breaths, you got a little taller, excellent. It's also going to help you manufacture more easily, like you'll pee easier, you'll poop easier. Everything that comes from the pelvic floor will be more stable because you have a stack of pressure. Yeah, I mean, everything's a byproduct of pressure, like women and their breasts. So more often than not, they have almost no muscle tension that they can control in their upper pec. So that means that they build a ton of tension in this area, and then the volume increases where the muscle's weak. So their boobs drop. Now, hypothetically, if they were to do a little bit of like the banded breathing exercise, right where the point of transition is messed up, they can narrow some of those ribs that are just stuck in external rotation, so in that volume state, and then they can start to share that volume with the pressure points. It's how I work with women who have a need for, hey, I want to fix my shoulders, I want my breasts to sit a little higher, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it seems to be like hydraulics, right? If you have to increase pressure in one area, it has to the pressure is not going to escape anywhere. It's going to move somewhere else. It's just about movement of that internal hydraulic line. And so I think it seems to be so strange when we're hearing two guys talk about this because it's so bizarre. But it's how the system operates. It's how the system's functioning. And so what I came to an understanding with is if with this internal pressure system is if you have some type of dysfunction within that pressure system, it's like you're operating with a vehicle with a flat tire. You know, most people have a flat tire in place, so the vehicle is still going to run. It's still going to go places. It's not going to be as fast. It's not going to turn corners as easily. And so the goal is to reinflate that tire. Then if you don't fix it, now the axle is going to be off, and now the axle, moves things symmetrically to another area. Now the whole system's going to be out of whack. So the goal is to go to the central line and then try to fix things. I know you do like one of your practices, getting like that plyo ball and then laying on that thing, and that allows some like that proprioception, breathing diaphragmatically, and then allowing system that load to start to increase and send to that certain area where you're putting pressure on the spinal cord, or starts to actually innervate these muscle groups to start strengthening at that spot, which I found to be a great practice. Dude, number one, it's relaxing. And number two, I started to feel my spinal cord strengthening at the spot. And I did try a tennis ball one time at work, and I was like, dude, the ball that's hard, it doesn't work very well. So the plyo ball, there's something about it where it's like it allows the body to do this self-correcting thing. And it allowed me to start actually becoming more embodied to my system, and like listening to my body and like relaxing, getting heavy with it. And that was like really cool. And I think that started me on a journey within my body to start listening more, and then watching my body, stop having more of my inputs and just like letting the body do what it needs to do.
It may be because we're mammals and that's shaped like a breast. That's a distinguishing characteristic of a mammal that we
Interesting.
breastfeed.
What I
No,
would so after I started working with you as well, I was working with this woman who did fascial work on the body too. And so she also introduced getting a semi-inflated ball and place it on certain parts of the body and just leave it there and let the body do its thing. And so what
yeah,
I would do is I put it on my calf after work or whatever. I'd have really tight calves. And then so I would just sit there or watch TV, and then my whole leg would shake and move. And it was like the nervous system was regulating around my leg, and then the tension would go away. It was
yeah.
so fascinating how I would watch that.
It's like the living version of a dying snake. All the tissue learning to relax, but it's not like all the pressure is leaving the vessel. Just shared better.
Yeah, I thought it was tremendous. But after a while, it stopped shaking.
Yeah.
So it was like the body started to now regulate itself
Well, it had
after
to
using
work
it.
against its own tension. Like there's no that's the whole notion. Like if you spend 3 decades doing something a certain way, learning the correct way to do it, it makes no difference on how you're already doing it. You do have to teach your body how to come to terms with the way it's doing it and then figure out the new behavior. And that's, uh, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just easy to teach the body how to relax more than it is to teach the body how to do different. Because as soon as the body relaxes, I mean, that primes the pump. Your nervous system learns better when it's engaged, and if there's only a physical response or if there's only a mental response, there's absolutely no like quality for retaining the learning. We're turning that into like a future attempt. So we need to have some quality of uh, learning retention that comes through that effort.
Yeah, I think most of us who are in like high functioning environments, like it's a good thing. You're adding like stressors and stimulant to the system. I just think that people just they don't know when to stop or know how to rest or relax, which is the main problem. One of the main precursors for, guys will, when they're done with a shift, they go out, drinking with the boys, or they go to the gym and just like push extra hard when they don't know like ever how to rest.
Totally.
And I think that's one of the main issues for
That was,
injury.
that was a huge issue for me. I never knew how to rest. I mean, the notion of meditating made me angry as a kid, and I came from a family that was like very um, holistic and like uh, just settling to make my mind think about something that I could not grasp the concept of. It fucking drove me crazy, and it's all to say like hitting my head or circumstance had me pacing at a rate that was not comfortable, and there was no fixing that until I hit my head again. And once I hit my head again, it was okay, lights crazy, sounds are crazy, my emotions are crazy. I feel like I have a totally different perspective of inhibition. Things are that shouldn't be wrong, or sorry, I had a very loosened or like relaxed version of what I should do and shouldn't do after my head was hit. And it just came to the reality of like, if I'm going to be a mess like this, if I'm going to be like a drooling 10-year-old, then I need to figure out how to get myself out of this so I can not be a drooling 10-year-old and I can figure how to like be happy again. And fundamentally, that's like that fight or flight when you feel like you're dying on the inside or you feel like there's a part of you that you lost, that gives you initiative. But if someone has no perspective of what that's like and they have no sense of self-worth, there's going to be nothing they fight for. They're just going to be running away from the fear. And so I think the best thing that we can do for someone is not tell them, hey, look at all this interesting stuff. You could become so much more interesting by doing this. We're all bullshitting ourselves. We're all human beings who do things that we don't want to do, we shouldn't do. And if we were more disciplined or we cared about ourselves a little more, we wouldn't do them. So at the end of the day, for us to feel a little bit more of value to ourselves and be able to make more impression on our world, I want that better relationship. I want that better job. I want to feel better about myself when I wake up. We need to get over some bullshit and become stronger human beings. And I think at the end of the day, most people watching this, even if you relate to this, you have absolutely no perspective of what I'm talking about because you've never done these exact things until you start to feel what it's like to sit down with some of this panic and do it deliberately and then learn the tools that help you focus on the parts of your body that help you cool off. There's just going to be no perspective aside from, I want that, but it sounds like a story. It sounds like nothing. So I don't know. My work is not just teaching someone how to relax, but also teaching them that they have a 10% understanding of what their body is. And I don't need to teach them about the rest. I just need to show them it and they can chase it as much as they want or as little as they want, but they need to know that it's there.
Yeah, and one of the important factors too is like you're educating on vagal tone and learning these small skill sets to get the body into that state. And when I was mentioning the deep frontal line, I do. When you also mentioned the superficial front line, like the deep frontal line is completely separate from that, and you're
Yeah.
you're absolutely correct. How everything just crisscrosses through that midline, right? And so that deep front line, though, when I jumped into a rabbit hole around it because I was already studying these other and also integrating these other practices with qigong martial arts, and my wife is a yoga teacher, so she's taught me so much on yoga. What was crazy is that these were already ingrained ancient technologies that
Yeah.
people have suppressed. And
Yeah.
so the important part about the Chong Mai or the Shushan Nadi and the deep frontal line is that it's the body's internal axis. And so
Can
it's
we
not
do
like,
the rest of this in Mandarin?
what was that?
Can we do the rest of this in Mandarin?
Wait, what'd you say?
Can we do the rest of this in Mandarin?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So like Chiang Mai, these things they're not muscle systems. It's like
Yeah.
pressure and awareness systems
Mhm.
that are
Yeah.
coherent. And if they're coherent, they self-organize. And so if it's distorted, everything else is a system that's downstream. So like things, years of bracing, years of adrenaline, years of hypervigilance, years of emotional suppression, these all collapse those central lines. And so the real injury that people are trying to not understand is like this lack of internal coherence. And so rebuilding something like that is not fitness. There's no fitness thing. There's nothing sexy about rebuilding this central line. But it's so important, vital to get into that state. That's how you come into letting the body feel safe, letting the body relax, learning how to inhabit your body again. And in time, these things like these all these other mechanisms like plantar fascia, your calves, your adductors, your pelvic floor, your psoas, your diaphragm, your mediastinum, even your tongue that accesses the neck muscles. These are the pressure chambers, and so all these things start to feel safe. They start to relax. They start to lose that chronic tension, and I think a lot of people. I've talked a lot about this on this podcast. Is like emotional suppression is an invisible link to a lot of this as well for people. And so, and not to over identify with it, but to recognize that there are invisible things that trap you, the system that remembers, emotions that you may never wanted to face. Um, and so a lot of times people who have trapped emotions, they have tight jaws or they didn't realize that they grind their teeth at night. So these are all things that start adding up over time with a lack of expression. And that's kind of like what that comes from is your ability to not speak your truth. And so the body just remembers these mechanisms and repeats itself through the opposite, holding tension in those areas. And I find it to be pretty interesting to dive into things like that. And so like, and there's no damage, you were just like reintroducing, like re-educating the body how to do the opposite.
Yeah, I think there's a base language for humans that we feel before we say. I mean, you watch the Simon Sinek Power of Why?
No.
I would suggest looking that up on YouTube, but effectively the midbrain is the emotion center, the memory center, the limbic center, which means that it reacts before it thinks. And if we can condition people to be exposed to that reactive center and not have to overthink it, but just expose them to it, like let them I don't know what's the word for it, stew in that experience, they'll start to find out that instinct and their inclination to react to things is oftentimes a truer form of expression than what they think about and what they try to doll up. That human beings are a reduced version of what we used to be. We have none of the same like predatory or like primal engaging factors that we used to, and we need a little bit more some viscera. I mean, I can talk about that for years on end, but I think at the end of the day, we all have an issue with viscera because we don't perceive the inflamed parts of our midlong, particularly the organs. We rebuff force into our limbs, and when force does not enter into our organs, we literally have no capacity to brace our spine. And I don't think most people have good musculature lining their spine. That's why the plyo ball is so nice, because it does allow for you to brace those muscles direct. And fundamentally, people don't have the parts that should be supporting, and the parts that should be yielding, allowant. And so they go around upside down face trying to figure out why everything's so difficult. But I mean, they're causing their own hemorrhoids, so to speak.
Well, the pressure has got to go somewhere, And when I worked with you, you had me wearing a breath belt. I had a plyo ball in between my thighs, and then you had me on a vibration plate. And so I was like, "What the fuck is this guy doing?" But after I was done, I was like, "Holy shit, dude!" Like my whole system was remembering how to feel, how to walk. Like when I was walking and pacing, maybe like five steps, the system like was like, "Oh, I know how to walk again, like this."
Yeah,
And
it was
it self-pacing was crazy.
It was only building out as much coherence from both sides of the spine, such that more force traveled to your spine. I wasn't trying to teach you any behavior. I just wanted more of the actual combined vibration to travel to your viscera so that your brain could consume it as opposed to like resist it, which is what your tendency was.
Yeah. So, and what came out of that too, was I had a pelvic floor surgery a while back, and that was something I had not realized had affected my body, because of the actual trauma from a scalpel. I had like an infection, like an abscess, and so they cut it out. And then, but that became my flat tire per se, what I was explaining out before. It was
Do
my
you refer to
weakest.
yourself as post-op now, or is that a different kind of pelvic floor surgery?
No, it was. What do you mean by that?
Sorry.
Well, just like
I
a
couldn't help
simple.
myself. It was a trans joke. I apologize.
Oh no, this was something I did not want to do.
Yeah.
But it was like, dude, just like the scalpel touching the skin on that
I can
area
only imagine. That sounds like the worst thing I've ever heard.
is damaging. And so I had realized just by that vibration play, it activated the pelvic floor because it tried to create coherence.
Yeah.
But that was the main weak link for my system.
Yeah.
And so actually most of all my issues came from that area because it's not taking pressure coherently. So
Yeah, like your foot injury was probably caused from a degree of tension and like resistance down in your lower abdomen.
100%, dude. And that was from bracing over. Well, I also overtrained. Like I never rested. I would work 24-hour platoon schedules, get off, and then there was never a rest point. And then when I was in my 20s, I never got to the point of actually letting the body relax.
Well, like me, you couldn't do that meditation stuff. You were stuck in the only thing that made you feel better was feeling your body. And because you couldn't let go, you had to feel your body the way you could. So
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't know. It's like totally my own ignorance, and we learn through pain, it's
better
like
that though than running away from it. Better to like run into the burning building when you have absolutely no solutions than to like run away from it, because at some point you're going to get 10 years of running away from that building and you're going to have no concept of how to run towards it. So I think there is still utility of if you're stressed to the upteenth degree, pursue more stress. I think it's a better circumstance than the person that runs away.
Yeah, I think running away is like there's like a fear entrapment, and that's a harder loop to extract yourself from, because you're teaching someone how to get out of that loop. It's a loop, obviously, so getting out of loops, the way someone explained to me what a loop is, and whether it's neurological, psychological, emotional, even spiritual, it's like you're going to look at the Christmas lights with your parents in the car, and you're driving around the block, and your parents are like, "Hey, did you see that snowman to the right?" And you look, you didn't see it. They're like, "Okay, let's go around the block again, and let's go see the snowman again." And then once you get to the house, "Hey, did you see the snowman?" No, I didn't see it. All right, let's go around the block again until you see the snowman. And so like this concept is that's the loop. Whatever we're in, we fail to witness the snowman. And so what the snowman can be is like how you perceive. It can be in the eye of the beholder, really, of what that snowman is. But our loops are they feel like entrapments, and then once we're in entrapment, it becomes like this a normalization of that deviance.
Fixation. You get stuck in that, and your vibes doesn't change. It's like inertia. If you're staying on if something's moving and continuously being listed in the same movement, it's not all but gonna sudden like start vibrating in a different way. This is the way you like it, and that's the way you're gonna stay. And until you learn a new song and how to maintain that song for 30 years, it's probably not gonna be the one you play.
That's why I liked your stuff, dude, because I'm like in the business of like keeping the body guessing. So doing little small different nuances that the body's like, "Oh, what is this?"
Post-op. You just want to keep it guessing. I get it.
How dare you? In a general sense, you know what I'm saying?
No,
Because
I totally do. Yeah, and you do a good job of it. I mean, when we worked together, you were killing it. You were very receptive to stuff that was clearly frustrating you.
yeah, because it's like I like witnessing. I've done enough like witnessing the brain activity, the mind activity with stuff, and whenever my mind like does something that like, hey, this is not, we don't like this, that's something I lean into because I know it's something that's going to help me or benefit me because it's causing the mind to create this noise. And it seems to be a really interesting practice. And so I always tell people like usually when there's let's give an example. Usually when there's fear involved, it's something to look into because it's an alert system, right? So it's something to read into it usually because there's information there that needs to be integrated.
I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, the short of it is people need to be guided to become more tolerant to their own stressors and not do it to the intensity by which maybe we do or you do, but they need to have some of that same conditioning where they run towards the fire.
Yeah. So can you explain the breath belt? I think that was always
I got
interested
a
about
little, I got about a minute and a half, so I can, but I'm gonna have to skedaddle shortly if you're cool with that.
that. Sure. Why not?
With respect to the breath belt, you know Wim Hof, the ice guy?
Yeah.
So there's been a number of Wim Hof studies, particularly a study about intercostals and how he was able to become immunosuppressive of some, or he had some immune response where he could resist the effects of some pathogens injected into him, like some bacteria or virus or whatever. And at the end of the day, your intercostals, when they're built out, they convey a level of heat to your organs. That heat keeps you insulated and keeps you from getting sick, so to speak. But what it really does is it generates a coherence around all of your rotating factors such that you can start to reach better. You can push a lot more weight off your actual rib cage instead of your shoulders or exclusively your pecs. I
Mhm.
mean, fundamentally, I jumped up in strength factors by like 30% once my ribs got strong. And I can have weak arms and still push more than I used to be able to because my ribs are stronger than they used to be. And that means that my spine has more range of motion. It's unbelievable. But I would say put the belt on as high as you can. And if you're a lady, you're going to probably want to get something other than the breath belt, maybe just a normal dress or like a normal belt you can put on because it's going to hurt your breasts otherwise. And if you have something this small going over your breast or under your breast, wherever, awesome. End all be all is that your ribs need to have some compression such that they learn how not to just expand outward, but they learn how to pull upward. So I like to think that the ribs expand like this from the bottom to the top. They're going to lift up like this. And that's going to feel like they're climbing upward, but then they're expanding outward. Best way for you to create that, wear the breath belt, do 25 minutes, and then try to make it a regular habit for 14 days. And then when you get good enough at being able to wear it, I need for you to make it uncomfortable as quick as you can make it. Because maybe 15 minutes in, it'll get uncomfortable, but I want for you to do that 10 seconds in. If you can wear it for 45 minutes at that uncomfortable standard, you're essentially just putting all of the tissue that used to resist those squeezes into like a chokehold and letting it learn how to like sip breath. Dude, honestly, the amount of changes that happen to my ribs, like the bruising, the muscle changes, all that kind of stuff, they can take some real force now. And it's not like I'm feeling it in muscle bellies. I was just bone taking the weight. And as soon as the bone takes the weight, now I have the ability, like my shoulder can expand much farther off my rib cage without separating. Like it's not reaching right now. It just has much more leverage to be able to reach off of my ribs and then push back into them. So there's a ton of benefit that comes from strong ribs. Don't overthink it. Just get hot. get uncomfortable, invite the panic in, dude.
Yeah, I agree, man. Yeah, the breath belt's it's a great tool. I like using it a lot. When I'm at work, I'll put it on. No one even knows I have it on.
Yeah.
I'm just like walking around with it, and it's like it also is relaxing.
Yes.
You know, I feel like it stimulated the vagal tone, and then my diaphragm was like, okay, I know how to remember how to breathe this way again, and then
Yeah.
it's like just a nice revamp to the system.
Well, you're bringing heat to your core, to your center. That's the most important thing you can do. Like when you're dying, that's what happens. Like the quality at which, like your hands and feet no longer become a priority when your organs need to be circulated.
Totally, dude. Well, we're pressed on time. So thanks, dude, for coming on again. And I feel like we can talk forever and just like investigate so much. But
Yeah, it's always a pleasure.
thanks, dude, for coming on. And yeah, everyone, thank you for listening. I love you guys. Take care.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to learn some Mandarin so I can say goodbye properly next time.
All right, dude.